Alright, well, next in the lineup is Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this when I say that this is the point where these movies really started to go downhill. And it's only the second movie. That's kind of impressive. But right from the start, this movie seems to have a really misguided goal to be darker and more over the top than the first one. I mean, it's trying to pull like an Empire Strikes Back combined with the scope of the Two Towers. And for something that's just supposed to be a silly pirate flick, it doesn't work. This movie is longer than the first one, which only increases a problem that I have with the first one, in that it was too long. This movie feels padded. I mean, I could, again, just like the first one, I could have trimmed a lot out of this movie. Like there's this big scene with the Black Pearl crew becoming imprisoned and subsequently escaping this island of cannibals. Now, it was a fun sequence. It was shot well, and like I said, it was a decent chase scene. It was a fun little action beat. But when you get right down to it, it had nothing to do with the story. It does not advance the characters in any way. And the movie just kind of forgets about it as soon as it's over. So that could have gone. I mean, that could have. I can't really see any point to that other than just throwing an action scene in there, just for the sake of throwing an action scene in there. But back to the performances. You know, I praised Johnny Depp's performance in the first one, but here I've heard some people highlight this point already, and this is a point that I highly agree with. In that he has no element of surprise anymore, and that's not just because it's the second movie. I mean that could have. There was a very big risk with bringing back the Jack Sparrow character, considering he was just so fresh in the first one, and how do they make him just as fresh in the second one? Well, the answer is they don't. They instead of making him mysterious, instead of making him this swashbuckling, dashing, sly character, they just make him goofier. Johnny Depp spends so much of this movie just acting weird, and there's really no point to it. He minces around a lot more than he does in the first one. He spazzes. There are a lot more scenes where the characters don't really know what he's talking about. So I have to question, why would you go this route? If you weren't going to do anything new with the character, why did you bring him back? And I'll tell you the answer. Because he was popular. They thought that people would eat up this franchise just because hey, Jack Sparrow's back. Although I can't really fault him for that because it worked. I mean, this movie is one of the highest grossing movies of all time. All these pirate movies are, so I have to. I guess I can't really fault them for exploiting a formula that makes a lot of money. But it's just the difference between. It just comes down to the difference between that and what would make a more interesting movie. Johnny Depp, I got a few laughs out of him this time, but for the most part, he's just thoroughly predictable this time around, and I think that's the biggest detriment to his character this time around, is that he's predictable. Even in all of his weirdness, and even in all of his confusing antics, he's predictable. You know exactly what he's going to do. You know, I mean, he is only out there for self-preservation. With the first one, he kind of kept you guessing as to what he was going to do next, who he was going to betray next, why he was really doing this. Did he really care about Orlando Bloom's character or Keira Knightley's character? Here he sells Orlando Bloom's character to the villain's crew, and the movie makes no it leaves no room for ambiguity as to what he is after in this movie, and that brings me to the plot. He is only after self-preservation in this movie. This takes place shortly after the first one. Jack Sparrow is parading around, and suddenly he's approached by his old shipmate, Bootstrap Bill Turner, the father of Orlando Bloom's character, and he's played by Stellan Skarsgård. Right away, Stellan Skarsgård, I mean, he's a really good actor, but all the characters in the first movie were saying to Orlando Bloom's character, you know, you remind me of your father, or you're the spitting image of Bootstrap Bill. Would you ever confuse Stellan Skarsgård for Orlando Bloom? I mean, even taking the age difference out of it, you wouldn't even confuse Alexander Skarsgård for Orlando Bloom. But I guess I can look past that in the grand scheme of things. But Bootstrap Bill comes to Jack Sparrow on behalf of Davy Jones, who's basically the Grim Reaper of the sea. He's this mo-capped pirate captain who wields a ship called the Flying Dutchman that can go underwater, and he basically approaches people who are either dead or dying, and says like you do you not want to be judged for your sins in life? Join my crew, join my undead crew, join my undead fish people crew, and postpone the judgment by 100 years. Honestly, I don't really know who would in their right mind take this deal, especially after seeing the living conditions, but I digress. Apparently Jack, over a decade ago, made a deal with Davy Jones that netted him the Black Pearl. He got the Black Pearl in exchange for at the end of, I think, 12 years, I think they say. In exchange for being captain of the Black Pearl for 12 years, Jack would subsequently become a member of Davy Jones's crew. Well, since he doesn't want to do that, and he wants to continue captaining the Pearl, Jack is now in search of the Dead Man's Chest, which is a chest that Davy Jones hid, which contains his heart. Now, since Jack does not want to become a part of Davy Jones's crew, he is marked with this thing called the Black Spot, which draws the Kraken to him. The Kraken will eventually come and drag his ship down, and him along with it. So Jack, in an effort to save himself, he basically leads the characters in this movie on a hunt for the Dead Man's Chest, because once he controls Davy Jones's heart, then he essentially controls Davy Jones. Because as you will probably guess, as is probably made obvious, he can just go call the Kraken off me and do what I say, or I will stab your heart. All right, so that's. Oh, I forgot. At the same time, Will Turner and Elizabeth, who are still played by Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley, are arrested by the East India Trading Company for aiding and abetting a criminal in the first movie, and the guy in charge, Lord Cutler Beckett, played by Tom Hollander, he basically says to them, "You will go and find Jack Sparrow and give him these letters of marque. He will be a privateer. He will be completely legitimate. I will not hunt him anymore. And in exchange, he will give you his compass, his magic compass, and you will bring it back to me, and I will let your fiancé out of jail." So that's the deal he has for Orlando Bloom's character. And the compass, as if this movie wasn't complicated enough, in theory, they established in the first movie that the compass, Jack's compass, points to whatever you want most in the world. But for some reason, whenever Jack tries to use it, it can't come to a definite direction. So the movie basically says Jack Sparrow doesn't know what he wants. I disagree. He knows what he wants. He wants not to die. So this little subplot of him not knowing what he wants really seems to come out of nowhere. It doesn't really make any sense. I mean, it makes sense when they bring it up at the very end of the movie when his crew is getting attacked by the Kraken and he's just heading for the hills. It kind of makes sense then, but the rest of the movie it doesn't. So by that elaborate plot description, you've probably guessed another big problem with this movie, in that it's too complicated. I mean, there's too much going on in this movie. This movie, like I said, is longer than the first one, and it needs that length to justify having all of these different subplots, some of which don't even get resolved by the end of this movie. Because what they did was they did kind of a Lord of the Rings or a Matrix technique in that they filmed this one and the third movie at World's End back to back. Why you would need to do that for, again, a silly pirate flick is beyond me. But like I said, Johnny Depp, I can't really go so far as to say that he's bad, but you do really get the sense that there's not really a whole lot of panache behind the performance anymore. It really does seem like he's acting goofy just for the sake of being goofy. The performance just doesn't seem as inspired this time around. Orlando Bloom is actually better this time around. Same with Keira Knightley, because even though their story was essentially completed at the end of the first movie, they for some reason brought their characters back. They have even less reason to be here than Jack Sparrow, because Jack Sparrow, you can kind of guess why he's here, because he was a popular character. He was a lot of fun. He's a pirate in the Pirates of the Caribbean flicks. But Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley, their story was over. I mean, they were supposed to live happily ever after, and for some reason they bring them back. I don't know why, but on the upside, their performances are better. They do seem to be trying a lot. They do seem to be trying to pull something. They do seem to be trying to have a lot more fun. I mean, they don't really seem like as much of a bone achre this time around. They do seem to be trying to embrace the silliness a bit more, but again, it's just the way their characters are written. Their characters are just so incorruptible and so... They're not as bland this time around. I will give them that. and that's partially to do with the performances. But I don't know. Whenever it cuts back to their characters and them trying to find their way back to each other and trying to save each other and talking to each other, I'm just like, come on, get back to the cool stuff. Bill Nye is very good in the movie. Bill Nye plays Davy Jones, and it's kind of like Gollum, where it's a mocap performance. And I will say this: Davy Jones and the rest of his very moist fish people crew are rendered pretty well. They're not quite real. I mean, they aren't quite as, they don't look quite as good as Gollum or other digital characters I've seen, but they come close. You almost think that they are there. But Bill Nye, he's fun. He's kind of like Jeffrey Rush in the first one, where he's hamming it up. He has all these weird fishy mannerisms, because what he is, he's essentially got this octopus-like head with a beard made of tentacles. His left hand is just this big lobster claw. So it's a really fun design, and just the way he kind of moves, he kind of hobbles toward his opponents, but at the same time he has this very imposing presence. So Bill Nye is a lot of fun. He's kind of over enunciating a lot of his syllables. He's, like I said, he's really getting in the face of Johnny Depp and other characters. So I really liked Bill Nye's performance. He seemed to be walking a fine line between funny and silly, and intimidating. Actually, at times this movie, I think, gets a little too dark. This movie gets a little too intense because the scenes on the Flying Dutchman, Davy Jones's ship, are not really pleasant to watch. They're very grim, and I'm just thinking to myself, this is a Disney movie, and this is meant to be a fun pirate flick. I don't really know what the point of these darker scenes are, because like I said, the first one was relatively simple. It was, I mean, these pirates fight these other pirates and rescue this damsel in distress. Again, the first one had problems, but this movie just kind of not only does it multiply some of the problems of the first one, but it adds new problems. Like I said, Johnny Depp, the performance is not as inspired this time around. But Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley are better. Bill Nye is a lot of fun. Stellan Skarsgård is fine, even though he kind of falls into that same category that I think Orlando Bloom fell into in the first one, where he plays it way too grim. And I understand why they played it very grim with him, because he's essentially been serving on the Flying Dutchman for years. He's very broken up by the fact that his son is now involved. So I understand why they played him to be grim, but they could have added some more life to him. I mean, they could have showed that he was kind of broken up, but at the same time, I had a hard time buying that this guy was ever lively. I had a hard time buying that this guy was ever a very swashbuckling pirate. And it's not necessarily because of Stellan Skarsgård's acting per se. I think it's just the direction, because I think he plays it how he was directed. Um, yeah, so he's all right, I guess. I mean, he's misdirected, but he's all right. Jack Davenport is is back because had to bring him back. He played the Commodore Norrington in the first one. I have no idea why he is back, but he kind of falls into that same category of Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley in this one, where he it's kind of this pattern. The people who were boring in the first one are made less boring in this one, um, even though they have no reason to be here. But Commodore Norrington has since lost his commission as Commodore, and he's in Tortuga. He's getting drunk. His powdered wig is all over the place. He has this beard going on. He's so he can essentially have a funny scene, but for some reason they feel the need to shoehorn in this story arc of redemption later on in the movie, where he betrays Jack Sparrow and steals Davy Jones's heart and brings it to Lord Cutler Beckett. Cliffhanger. But that brings me to Tom Hollander's performance. Now, Tom Hollander, this could have easily been just another Jonathan Pryce role, like how Jonathan Pryce was in the first one, where Jonathan Pryce was he didn't really seem like he fit, but because he just didn't really look like his performance wasn't as fun as a lot of other people's. And Tom Hollander does not go for fun, but the way he kind of plays it, the way he has this very his voice never changes an octave. He never gets angry. He never yells. He never attacks anyone. He just kind of sits there, pondering and planning, and it's very subtle. He gives a very understated performance, and I actually found that it worked. I really liked Tom Hollander in this movie for the few times that he was on screen. I actually wish there was more of him and less of Jack Sparrow. But he occasionally cracks off this very dry humor type joke, and he's, like I said, it could have easily been very boring, very joyless, but just the way that Tom Hollander plays it, just the way that he occasionally inserts the dry humor into it, just the way that he's so different from the other characters in the movie, the way that he is just so radically, he is such a radical foil for the rest of the characters who are like, "Arr, swashbuckling pirates," and then you have just very polite, very very subtly menacing British guy. So I liked Tom Hollander in the movie. I liked Orlando Bloom. I liked Keira Knightley, even though I did not like their characters. Jack Davenport was all right. Bill Nye was good. Can't really think of much. Oh yeah, Naomie Harris shows up in this movie as this voodoo priestess. She can be fun. She can. I liked her scene when she was. They kind of hinted this drunken, intimate past that she had with Jack Sparrow. And immediately when Jack walks in, she just completely looks past him and starts hitting on Orlando Bloom. So she can be fun. But yeah, that just about does it for the acting. But that kind of brings me to the writing of this movie, where the comedy is not quite as strong. The comedy is does seem a little more in your face. It doesn't really seem as it's kind of like the Johnny Depp performance. It doesn't really seem as well wielded this time around. It's occasionally it gets a little bit more sophomoric, but at the same time, this movie feels the need to partake in a lot of other very dark imagery. Probably more grim than this movie really has any right to be, because there's this scene near the beginning where it pans over to this prison, and there's this guy in a gibbet, this hanging cage, and you see him essentially get eaten alive by these crows. And I'm like, that was just in a Disney movie. Granted, a live-action Disney movie, but a Disney movie. Is that really the type of imagery you want to show your kids? I mean, I know this is PG-13, but kids are going to go see this. Kids are going to, parents are going to bring their kids along expecting a rousing, fun pirate adventure, and they're going to get this very creepy imagery. And that's not the only example of it. But yeah, the scenes on the Flying Dutchman are not very pleasing to the eye, at least in my opinion, because they're all shot in the rain. There's all this water, pus, slime flying at the screen. The crew themselves all have these very fishy attachments to them. When I say they're fish people, I really do mean that, because they honestly look like these weird hybrids between human and fish. The designs are creative. I mean, the designs are creative. There's this one guy where a portion of his face is kind of like a blowfish. I mean, he has spikes like a blowfish that kind of move when he talks. But again, just the way that they're rendered and the way that they're shot, it just sets this very needlessly scary atmosphere. And I'm not easily scared by movies, but when I watch this thing that at times wants to be a high flying, lighthearted adventure, I'm somewhat jarred by what it wants to be at other times, which is this very dark fantasy, almost Guillermo del Toro style fantasy. So I was a little confused on that point, but with that said, for all my complaining, the movie does have several moments of the same type of lighthearted adventure vibe that attracted people to the first one. Because, like I said, the island scene was a particular highlight, even though even there some of the imagery can be a little disturbing with because these islanders they're kind of like these skull islanders from Peter Jackson's King Kong, but at least there it was a little more justified. Where they have all these very uncomfortable looking piercings. They're all very needlessly creepy looking, just in the way that they're designed. They have this skull type paint all over them. But the action is shot very well. There's no shaky cam. There's a very enjoyable three-way sword fight towards the end, and even the more intense scenes, like the Kraken, the scenes where the Black Pearl crew are being attacked by the Kraken. Those scenes are shot very well. It's been a while since we've seen a sea monster attack like that. So kudos on the sea monster. I mean, the effects in this movie are not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that a lot of the merits of this movie suffer because they are somewhat misguided. Because, like I said, I think the effects are a little too dark and intense. And I do remember these skeleton people from the first one, but even then, they didn't really seem like they were as in your face as this one. So, because yeah, this movie is a lot more in your face, in my opinion. But basically, this movie boils down to more over the top, but less charming. That's really the best phrase I can use to describe this. Because like I said, there are a lot more scarier scenes that I think will frighten younger viewers. I have seen younger viewers frightened by this movie. The humor, while still okay, is not as good. There are several points where the humor gets very juvenile. The plot is very overcomplicated. There are too many characters. And the acting is very hit or miss, in my opinion. But with that said, the action, like I said, is filmed very competently. You can tell what's going on, which is something that I'm finding to be increasingly infrequent in this day and age, which is a shame. But yeah, it still has several moments of the same piratey fun, of the same swashbuckling fun that you came to see. It's just that the movie doesn't really know how to balance that as well as the first one. And like I said, the first one has problems, but this movie just seems to multiply a lot of the problems. Some things are less of a problem than they were in the first one, but more often than not, this movie is just a major downgrade. For as bigger and better as it aspires to be, it just seems a little overblown, a little bloated, and the good stuff doesn't really seem to be as good as the first one. So yeah, I can completely understand if someone doesn't like this movie. I don't particularly like it all that much. I don't regret seeing it, if only because of the far spread moments of good in the movie. But what should really set the stage for the disappointment of this sequel is the fact that Jack Sparrow is not as fun as he used to be.